The Apache woman was dragged to the rancher's ranch, but he was not the monster she thought he was. Ahioka was a young Apache woman, no older than 18, who lived with her family near the wide, rolling plains. The land around her home was both beautiful and unforgiving. Tall grasses swayed in the wind, the sun blazed hot in the afternoon, and the rivers ran clear and cold. Life for her people was not easy, but it was full of tradition, family, and a deep connection to the earth. Ahioka loved the mornings when she could walk to the river to gather water, listening to the songs of birds, and watch the sun slowly rise over the horizon. Each day was a careful balance of survival and the quiet joy of nature. One morning, while the sun had just begun to cast its golden light, Ahioka was out checking the small herd of goats her family kept. The air smelled fresh, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and the dust of the plains. She hummed softly, a melody her mother had taught her, feeling at peace in the stillness of the land. Suddenly, a distant noise reached her ears, a sound foreign and alarming. It was the hurried thud of hooves and the sharp clatter of men shouting. Fear gripped her immediately. In the past, she had heard stories of outsiders arriving suddenly, taking what they wanted without care for the lives they disturbed. Before she could fully understand what was happening, a group of men appeared from behind the hills. They were not members of her tribe. Their faces were hardened and unfamiliar, their hands strong and unkind. Panic surged through Ahioka's heart. She tried to run, but one of the men moved faster, catching her arm. His grip was tight, and despite her struggles, she could not break free. The world spun around her as she was pulled toward horses waiting nearby. Her heart pounded like a drum. The fear of the unknown threatened to consume her. As they rode, the landscape shifted. The familiar plains of her home receded behind her, replaced by unfamiliar terrain, and the sun began to sink low in the sky. Ahioka's mind raced with thoughts of her family. She thought of her mother, who had always warned her about strangers, and her younger brother, who would be worried if she didn't return. The wind whipped her hair around her face as she clung to the idea that somehow she would survive. She had heard stories, whispered by elders, of women who had been taken but later escaped. She clung to that hope as tightly as she clung to the side of the horse. By the time the sun was fully set, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and red, the riders arrived at a large ranch. Ahioka had never seen such a place. Fences stretched across wide fields, and large wooden barns stood tall, filled with the scent of hay and animals. The sounds of distant cattle lowing and the occasional bark of a dog were strange to her ears. The ranch seemed both alive and strange, a world far removed from her home. Her fear did not lessen. She assumed the worst about the man who owned this place. Stories of cruel settlers had filled her childhood, and now she was here, alone and helpless, facing one. The rancher, Samuel, came out to meet them. Ahioka expected to see a cruel man with harsh eyes, ready to punish or control her, but what she saw instead confused her. Samuel was a tall man with broad shoulders, yet his expression was calm and measured. His eyes were alert but not threatening. He spoke softly to the men who had brought her, and when he approached Ahioka, he did not raise his voice or reach for her roughly. He simply looked at her with a kind of careful curiosity. That small kindness did not erase her fear. She kept her gaze lowered, wary of his intentions. Inside the ranch, she was shown a small room with clean bedding. She noticed that everything was orderly and well cared for. Food was placed before her, simple bread, water, and dried meat. The smell was unfamiliar, but it reminded her of her home and made her stomach rumble. She hesitated, unsure whether she could trust it. Hunger was stronger than her suspicion, and she took small bites, her hands trembling. All the while, Samuel watched quietly from a distance, giving her space, yet making sure she was safe. That night, as Ahioka lay on the bedding, she tried to make sense of what had happened. She remembered the faces of the men who had taken her, the speed at which everything had happened, and the unknown path she had been forced to follow. She realized that her fear was not only of the men who had captured her, but also of the unknown life that awaited her in this new place. Sleep came reluctantly, filled with dreams of her family and the wide plains she loved so dearly. The next morning, Ahioka watched the ranch come alive. Workers moved efficiently, feeding animals, repairing fences, and tending to crops. The land was vast, much larger than anything she had ever seen. The cattle grazed calmly, and the horses were groomed with care. She began to notice small details, how Samuel spoke politely to each worker, how he made sure everyone had what they needed to do their job safely. Slowly, the first seeds of doubt about her initial fear began to grow. Could it be that he was not the cruel man she had imagined? Despite this, Ahioka did not speak to him. Her mind was a storm of caution. She observed everything silently, moving quietly as if blending into the background. The workers, some of whom were friendly, offered nods or gentle smiles, but she returned none. Trust was not something she could give easily. Her world had taught her to be careful, to assume the worst of strangers. Even the simplest gesture, like offering her water or bread, was met with suspicion. Yet in her heart, a tiny spark of curiosity began to flicker. Days passed slowly. Ahioka began to notice the routines of the ranch. She saw the care given to the animals, the rhythm of work from morning until night, and the way Samuel treated everyone, not with force but with fairness. She began to realize that perhaps there was more to this man than the frightening image she had carried in her mind. He did not raise his hand or shout. He did not force her to do anything against her will. And yet he expected her to follow simple rules of the ranch, like keeping her room tidy or helping in small ways. In this balance of freedom and guidance, she started to feel something she had not felt in days, a small sense of safety. Ahioka's mind was a mixture of relief and confusion. She had been brought here against her will, yet she was not hurt. She had expected cruelty, but instead she found patience. The ranch felt alive, bustling with activity, yet it was calm in ways she did not understand. At night, as she lay on the clean bedding, she could hear the distant lowing of cattle and the soft rustle of the wind. It was not home, but it was not terrifying either. Slowly, the harsh line between fear and curiosity began to blur. Even with these small observations, Ahioka remained cautious. She knew better than to trust too easily. Her experiences had taught her that appearances could be deceiving. And yet, a small part of her longed to understand this place and the man who owned it beyond the surface. She wondered if there might be more to life than fear, more to people than what the first glance revealed. And so, with her heart beating fast, she decided to watch and wait, to learn slowly, to see if this unexpected place could ever feel like something more than a prison. And so, the first part of Ahioka's story ended with her sitting quietly by the window of her room, watching the sun rise over the vast fields of the ranch. She was still afraid, but her fear had begun to change into something else, a cautious curiosity, a tiny spark of hope, and the first glimmer of understanding that not all strangers were monsters. Ahioka woke early the next morning, her thoughts still filled with the strange mix of fear and curiosity that had begun to grow inside her. The ranch was waking as she watched from the small window of her room. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the wind carried the scent of fresh earth and hay. She could hear the lowing of cattle in the distance and the soft clatter of hooves on wooden floors. Slowly, the rhythms of the ranch began to reveal themselves, and she felt a strange sense of fascination. She stepped outside for the first time that day, her bare feet touching the cool, damp ground. Everything was alive with movement. Workers were tending to the animals, repairing fences, and preparing tools for the day ahead. Horses neighed softly as their riders guided them through the fields. The world of the ranch was unlike anything she had ever known, yet it carried a certain order and calm that intrigued her. Even from a distance, She could see the care with which each task was done, and she began to notice small details. The way Samuel spoke gently to his workers, the way he made sure the animals were fed, and the respect he showed to everyone around him. Despite the gentle routines, Ahioka remained cautious. She had learned not to trust easily, not after the terrifying experience of being captured. Every step she took was careful, every glance measured. She stayed close to the edges of the buildings, watching quietly as the ranch came alive. The workers sometimes glanced at her, offering nods or smiles, but she returned none. Her heart was guarded, and she wanted to be certain before she allowed herself to feel safe. Samuel noticed her presence but did not approach immediately. He understood that trust could not be forced. Instead, he allowed her to observe, letting her see that the ranch was a place of work and routine, not cruelty. He moved among the workers, giving instructions gently but clearly, always attentive to the animals and the people who cared for them. He carried himself with a quiet strength, not through intimidation but through calm confidence. Ahioka watched him with cautious eyes, beginning to realize that the man she had feared might be very different from the stories she had been told. Days passed slowly, each one a lesson in observation. Ahioka noticed how the workers moved together, helping one another without needing to be told. Samuel treated everyone fairly, listening to their concerns and making sure they had what they needed to complete their tasks. She saw him mend fences with skilled hands, feed the animals with care, and repair broken tools patiently. Every action seemed deliberate, done with thought and attention. Slowly, she began to understand that the ranch was not just a place of work but a place of respect, for people, for animals, and for the land itself. Ahioka began to take small steps, moving closer to the routines of the ranch. She helped carry water from the well, watched how the animals were fed, and even tried her hand at simple chores. Samuel observed from a distance, never forcing her, but always ready to offer guidance if she needed it. Each small success gave her confidence. She discovered that she could participate without fear, that the world of the ranch was not as dangerous as she had imagined. She began to see the possibility that she might survive here, and perhaps even find a place for herself. Communication remained a challenge. Ahioka spoke only a little English, and Samuel knew only a few words in her native tongue. At first, this created misunderstandings. Simple tasks had to be explained several times, and gestures were sometimes misread. Yet both of them were patient. Samuel would demonstrate with his hands, repeating actions until she understood. Ahioka would mimic him, learning slowly but surely. The process was frustrating at times, but it also allowed moments of quiet laughter and connection. Each day brought small victories, building a fragile bridge between two very different worlds. Ahioka began to notice small acts of kindness that surprised her. Samuel never raised his voice, even when mistakes were made. He offered her food and water without expecting anything in return. He respected her space and allowed her to rest when she was tired. For the first time since being taken, Ahioka felt a flicker of security. She realized that kindness could exist even in a place she had feared, that strength could be gentle, and that trust might be possible if given time. As the days continued, Ahioka started to explore the ranch more. She walked among the fields, noticing the patterns of planting and harvesting, the way the workers worked in harmony with the land. She watched the animals, cows, horses, goats, and began to understand their routines, learning how to care for them. Each day brought new knowledge, and with knowledge came a growing sense of belonging. She was still cautious, but her fear was slowly being replaced by curiosity and a desire to learn. One afternoon, a sudden challenge tested this fragile trust. A young calf had become stuck in a narrow fence opening, its legs trembling and eyes wide with fear. Ahioka froze at first, unsure if she should help. Samuel noticed her hesitation and approached quietly. Without scolding or commanding, he demonstrated how to gently free the animal. Ahioka followed his movements, her hands careful and deliberate. Together, they freed the calf, which stumbled away but quickly found its footing. The sense of relief was shared between them, a silent acknowledgement that they could work together. It was the first real moment of connection between them, a shared understanding that spoke louder than words. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Samuel offered her a simple meal. Ahioka hesitated but accepted, her hands trembling slightly. They sat in silence for a while, eating and watching the sky change colors. She realized that the fear she had carried for so long was beginning to fade. Not completely, not yet, but enough to let her notice the world around her without constant dread. The kindness of a stranger, the patience in his actions, and the order of the ranch were teaching her that life could be different than she had imagined. Night came, and with it, a quiet reflection. Ahioka lay on the bed provided for her, thinking of her family, of the plains, of the world she had known. She missed the familiar, but she also recognized that she was learning new ways to survive, new ways to understand people, and new ways to live. The fear that had once consumed her was now tempered with understanding. She began to see Samuel not as a monster, but as a man who was trying, in his own way, to care for the world around him. As she drifted to sleep, Ahioka realized that this ranch, this strange and unfamiliar place, might not be a prison after all. It was a place of work, of care, of patience, and of learning. And while she still did not know what the future would hold, she felt the first glimmer of something she had not felt in days: hope. From that night onward, Ahioka approached each day with a quiet determination. She would watch, she would learn, and she would take cautious steps toward understanding. The world of the ranch was vast and new, filled with routines, challenges, and moments of quiet beauty. And through it all, she began to see that the man she had feared might hold no cruelty at all. Instead, he might hold lessons that would change her forever, teaching her that trust, patience, and kindness could exist even in the most unexpected places. And so, the second part of Ahioka's story ended with her standing at the edge of the fields, watching the workers move in harmony with the land, feeling a mix of awe and cautious hope. Fear was still a shadow at the back of her mind, but it was no longer the force that controlled her. Instead, curiosity and understanding began to take root, guiding her through the new world she had been brought into, step by careful step. Days turned into weeks, and Ahioka slowly began to find a rhythm in the life at the ranch. She woke early each morning, the cool air of dawn brushing against her skin, and observed the workers as they prepared for the day. She had learned to recognize the subtle sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the distant clatter of tools, and the soft neighing of horses. The world that had once felt strange and frightening now seemed alive and full of purpose. Yet, despite the growing familiarity, Ahioka remained cautious. She had been taken from her home against her will, and she knew that the kindness of others could not be assumed. Samuel noticed her careful observation and patience. Unlike many others who might have forced her to adapt immediately, he allowed her time to understand the rhythms of the ranch. He never pressured her, never demanded obedience beyond what was necessary for her safety. Slowly, through small gestures and quiet actions, he began to build a bridge of trust. He would show her how to carry water without spilling it, how to feed the animals gently, and how to mend a broken fence. Each day brought new lessons, each task a chance to observe Samuel's calm strength. At first, communication was difficult. Ahioka spoke little English, and Samuel knew only a few words in her language. Misunderstandings were common. When she tried to explain something, he sometimes misread her gestures, and when he spoke, she struggled to understand. But both of them were patient. Samuel used gestures, demonstrations, and simple words, repeating actions until she understood. Ahioka, in turn, watched carefully and mimicked his movements. Slowly, step by step, they began to understand each other. It was a painstaking process, but it allowed moments of quiet connection, small laughs, and shared relief when tasks were completed successfully. One day, Samuel asked Ahioka to help with the horses. At first, she hesitated. Horses were large and powerful, and she had never been close to such animals before. But Samuel's calm presence reassured her. He approached the first horse slowly, speaking in gentle tones, and demonstrated how to brush its coat. Ahioka mimicked his actions, her hands shaking at first, but gradually growing steadier as she realized the horse was calm and trusting. Samuel nodded in approval, a small smile on his face, and she felt a warm sense of accomplishment. For the first time, she felt that she could contribute, that her actions mattered. The bond between Ahioka and Samuel grew through these small acts of shared effort. She began to notice the care he took in every action, not only with the animals but with the people who worked on the ranch. He listened patiently when they spoke, offered help without taking over, and treated everyone with fairness. Ahioka realized that strength was not always loud or forceful. It could be quiet, steady, and kind. This understanding slowly chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart, though she still remained cautious. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the fence together, Ahioka finally attempted a few words in English. Her pronunciation was hesitant, but she tried to express gratitude for Samuel's patience. He smiled warmly, responding slowly and carefully so she could understand. The moment was small but significant. It was the first time she had spoken directly to him, rather than just observing or following instructions. The exchange carried more meaning than words. It was a bridge between two very different lives, a silent acknowledgement of mutual respect. Ahioka also began to learn about Samuel's life, bit by bit. She discovered that he had inherited the ranch from his family and had spent years learning to care for the land and animals. He had faced hardships, yes, but he had always sought to treat others fairly, to respect the natural world, and to maintain the balance of the ranch. The realization surprised Ahioka. The man she had feared was not cruel or heartless. He was someone who had built a life through patience, hard work, and careful consideration. Her mind, once filled with fear, began to hold space for understanding. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of orange and pink, Ahioka found herself walking beside Samuel in the fields. The wind carried the scent of hay and soil, and the ranch was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals settling for the night. They walked in silence for a while, each step measured and deliberate. Ahioka realized that the silence was comfortable, not tense. Samuel did not rush her or demand conversation. He allowed the space between them to be calm and natural. In that quiet moment, she felt a small but growing sense of connection, a realization that perhaps trust could exist, slowly, through simple, patient actions. Ahioka also began to observe how Samuel handled challenges. One morning, a sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds covering the sky and strong winds threatening the livestock. Samuel moved quickly but calmly, directing the workers and securing the animals. Ahioka watched as he managed the chaos with a steady hand, never raising his voice, never panicking. She saw the respect the workers had for him, not out of fear but out of trust in his judgment. The experience left a deep impression on her. Strength, she realized, could be calm and steady, not just loud and forceful. Over time, Ahioka started participating more actively. She helped feed the animals, carried water to the fields, and assisted in repairing fences. Each task brought small lessons and growing confidence. Samuel continued to guide her gently, never demanding perfection, allowing her to learn through experience. Through these shared tasks, a bond formed, built not on words alone but on actions, trust, and understanding. One afternoon, a small crisis tested their emerging bond. A goat had become trapped in a narrow gap in the fence, and Ahioka froze, unsure of what to do. Samuel approached quietly, speaking in calm tones. He demonstrated carefully how to free the animal, step by step. Ahioka followed, her hands trembling, but she managed to release the goat safely. The animal ran back to its herd, and both of them shared a quiet moment of relief. It was not just about saving the goat. It was about realizing that they could work together, that trust could be earned through patience and guidance. As the weeks passed, Ahioka's fear slowly gave way to cautious respect. She still thought of her home and family, and she longed to see them again, but she also recognized the value of the lessons she was learning here. Samuel was no monster. He was patient, kind, and fair. He did not force her, he guided her. And through his actions, she began to understand that people could be more than the fears and stories told by others. Night times became moments of reflection. Ahioka lay on her bedding, thinking about the day's lessons. She recalled the small victories, the gentle guidance, and the moments of quiet connection. Her mind, once filled with panic and fear, now held a mixture of understanding and hope. The ranch, once a place of unknown danger, had become a space of learning and cautious trust. And Samuel, once a figure of imagined cruelty, had become a guide, a teacher, and a quiet presence she could begin to understand. By the end of this third part of her journey, Ahioka had begun to see the world in a slightly different light. The fear that had defined her early days at the ranch had not disappeared, but it had been tempered by observation, patience, and small acts of kindness. She realized that understanding required time, that trust was earned through consistent actions, and that people could surprise you in ways you did not expect. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with deep oranges and purples, Ahioka stood at the edge of the fields, watching the workers move among the animals. Samuel approached her quietly, nodding in greeting. She returned the nod, her heart a little lighter than it had been in weeks. The bond between them was still fragile, built on small moments of connection and shared experience, but it was real. And for the first time, Ahioka felt that she could begin to hope, not just for survival, but for understanding, for friendship, and perhaps even for a future that did not rely on fear alone. Life at the ranch had begun to settle into a rhythm for Ahioka. She had learned the daily routines, how to care for the animals, and how to carry out small tasks around the property. Her fear had been replaced by cautious curiosity and respect for Samuel, the rancher. She began to see him not only as a protector, but also as someone who genuinely cared for the land, the animals, and the people who lived and worked there. Yet life on the ranch was never without its challenges, and one day, Ahioka would face a moment that tested not only her courage, but also the trust that had begun to form between her and Samuel. It started on a bright morning, the sky a clear blue with only a few soft clouds drifting lazily. The air was warm, carrying the scent of fresh hay and the earthy smell of the fields. Ahioka had just finished feeding the goats and was walking toward the barn when she noticed a commotion near the main pasture. A young foal had wandered too close to the edge of the field, where a section of fence had weakened over the weeks. Before anyone could act, the foal pushed against the broken slats and became trapped, its small legs tangled in the wooden structure. The animal's frightened cries echoed across the pasture. Ahioka froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Her mind raced with panic. She had never faced such a situation alone, and the foal's distress was terrifying. But then she remembered Samuel's calm voice and steady hands, the way he had guided her in small tasks over the past weeks. She realized that running away would not help. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her shaking hands, and approached the trapped animal slowly. Samuel arrived shortly after, his presence calm and reassuring. He knelt beside the foal, speaking in gentle tones to soothe it. Ahioka watched him carefully, noting the patience and care in his movements. He guided her to assist him, showing her how to hold the animal safely without causing it further panic. Together, They worked methodically, freeing the foal's legs from the tangled fence. When the animal finally stumbled free and ran back to its mother, Ahioka felt a rush of relief and pride. It was a small victory, but it was significant. She realized that working together, even in fear, could lead to success. The day continued, but the sense of unease lingered. Later in the afternoon, dark clouds began to gather on the horizon. A storm was approaching faster than anyone had expected. The wind picked up, rattling the barn doors and carrying dust across the fields. Samuel quickly gathered the workers, giving clear instructions to secure the animals and protect the property. Ahioka moved with them, carrying buckets of water and helping wherever she could. The urgency of the situation was frightening, but she found strength in knowing she was part of the effort. As the storm grew stronger, a bolt of lightning struck a nearby tree, sending a spark that quickly ignited the dry grass. The fire spread rapidly, threatening the pastures and the animals. Panic surged through the workers, and Ahioka's heart pounded in her chest. But Samuel remained calm, directing each person with clarity and purpose. He assigned tasks efficiently, ensuring that the animals were moved to safe areas and that fire breaks were created to contain the blaze. Ahioka followed his instructions, her fear tempered by the trust she had built in his guidance. The fire raged for hours, and the work was exhausting. Ahioka found herself running alongside Samuel, carrying water, helping move frightened animals and reinforcing the temporary barriers. The sense of danger was intense, but she also felt a growing connection to the rancher. In this moment of crisis, words were not necessary. Their actions spoke louder than any conversation. Each glance, each coordinated movement reinforced the bond between them. Ahioka began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. At one point, a cow became trapped near the edge of the pasture, its legs stuck in uneven ground. Samuel acted quickly, instructing Ahioka to help calm the animal while he worked to free it. Her hands trembled, but she followed his guidance, speaking softly to the cow, stroking its neck and holding it steady. Samuel worked with precision, pulling the animal free without causing harm. When the cow finally stood, unharmed and calm, Ahioka felt a sense of accomplishment and awe. She realized that facing danger together had strengthened her trust in Samuel and in herself. The storm continued into the evening, and by the time it began to subside, everyone on the ranch was exhausted. The fields were scorched in some areas, the animals were weary, and the workers were covered in mud and sweat. Yet, there was a sense of triumph. The immediate danger had been managed, and the ranch had survived the storm. Samuel gathered the workers and Ahioka, acknowledging each person's efforts with quiet gratitude. He did not boast or demand recognition. Instead, he offered sincere thanks and encouragement. Ahioka felt a warmth in her chest, realizing that true leadership was not about power, but about care and guidance. As night fell, Ahioka sat quietly by the barn, reflecting on the day's events. The storm had been terrifying, but it had also revealed truths she could not ignore. Samuel was not a monster, as she had feared. He was a man of integrity and courage, someone who faced danger with calm determination and compassion. She thought about the moments when she had acted alongside him, when her fear had been tempered by his guidance, and when the animals had been saved because they had worked together. The experience had changed her perception of him, replacing fear with trust and respect. The next morning, the ranch began the slow process of recovery. Workers repaired fences, tended to the animals, and cleared debris from the fields. Ahioka joined in, her movements more confident than before. She realized that she was no longer just an observer. She was a participant, a part of the ranch's life and community. Samuel continued to guide her gently, showing her how to mend fences and care for the animals with attention and patience. Each task was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to deepen the bond between them. Over the following days, Ahioka reflected on the lessons of the storm. She had faced fear, acted under pressure, and discovered a resilience within herself she had not known existed. She had also learned that Samuel's strength lay not in harshness or cruelty, but in patience, care, and steady leadership. This realization shifted something deep within her. The man she had once feared had become a figure of guidance and trust, someone whose actions spoke louder than the stories she had heard. The experience of facing danger together also strengthened her confidence. Ahioka began to take initiative in small ways, anticipating tasks, offering help, and learning to act decisively when needed. She discovered that her fear, once overwhelming, could be managed and even transformed into a source of courage. She also saw the importance of working together, of trusting others, and of supporting one another in times of crisis. These lessons were not just about survival, they were about life, respect, and the connections that could form between people from different worlds. By the end of this part of her journey, Ahioka had grown significantly. She had faced real danger, acted alongside Samuel, and discovered a new strength within herself. The bond between them had deepened, built not on words alone, but on shared experience, trust, and mutual respect. She realized that fear, when confronted and understood, could give way to courage, and that people, even those once feared, could reveal unexpected kindness and integrity. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ahioka stood beside Samuel, watching the workers move among the animals. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sense of calm and renewal. She felt a deep appreciation for the lessons she had learned and a growing recognition of her own resilience. The world of the ranch, once foreign and frightening, had become a place of learning, growth, and connection. And so, the fourth part of Ahioka's story ended with a sense of triumph and understanding. Fear had been faced, danger had been overcome, and trust had been earned. Ahioka had discovered the strength within herself and the quiet courage in Samuel. Together, they had faced a challenge that tested their resolve, their patience, and their ability to work as one. The bond they had formed would guide them forward, preparing them for the choices and challenges that lay ahead in the final part of her journey. The days after the storm were calmer, yet they carried a quiet sense of reflection for Ahioka. She had survived fear, learned to trust, and discovered her own strength. The ranch, once a place of uncertainty, had become a space where she could grow, learn, and observe the kindness and patience of Samuel. Every task she undertook now seemed infused with purpose. Feeding the animals, carrying water, mending fences. Each action was no longer just about survival, but about belonging, contribution, and understanding. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, Samuel approached Ahioka with a gentle expression. He spoke slowly, carefully, and offered her a choice. She could remain at the ranch, learning and contributing, or she could leave and return to her people, to the life she had known before the capture. The question startled her. Freedom had always been in her mind, but now that it was offered, she felt an unexpected weight in her heart. The world she had feared had grown into something she understood, something she had a small part in shaping. Ahioka spent the day in quiet contemplation. She walked among the fields, feeling the soft wind on her face and listening to the lowing of the cattle. She thought of her family, of the wide plains she had loved, of the songs of the river and the laughter of her younger brother. She longed for the familiar, for the warmth of her mother's embrace and the comfort of the traditions she had grown up with. But she also reflected on the weeks she had spent at the ranch, the lessons she had learned, the trust she had built with Samuel, and the moments of courage and understanding she had discovered in herself. Her mind wandered to Samuel. She remembered the patience in his voice, the care in his hands, the calm determination that had guided her through fear and danger. She realized that the bond they had formed was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was built not on force or fear, but on respect, trust, and shared experiences. The man she had once feared had become someone she could admire, someone who had taught her that courage could be quiet, strength could be gentle, and trust could be earned through consistent care. In the late afternoon, Ahioka helped with the animals, her movements now confident and assured. Samuel watched her from a distance, offering guidance only when necessary. She noticed how much she had grown, how her hands moved with purpose, how her mind had learned to anticipate tasks and understand the needs of the ranch. Each action was a testament to her resilience and to the lessons she had absorbed. For the first time in weeks, she felt a quiet pride in herself, not just in surviving, but in learning, contributing, and understanding the world around her. As evening approached, Ahioka walked to a hill overlooking the ranch. From there, she could see the wide fields, the animals grazing peacefully, and the workers moving with purpose. She thought of the storm, of the fire, of the moments of fear she had faced, and how she had overcome them with Samuel by her side. Each memory was a reminder of growth, courage, and trust. She realized that freedom was not just about leaving, but about understanding the choices one made and the paths one took. Samuel joined her on the hill, standing quietly beside her. He did not speak at first, allowing the silence to be a space of reflection. Finally, he said gently, "You have learned much, Ahioka. You have faced fear and acted with courage. Whatever you choose, know that it will be respected." His words were simple, yet they carried a depth that touched her heart. She felt the weight of the decision before her, not just about where she would live, but about who she wanted to be and how she wanted to live her life. Ahioka thought deeply. She remembered her family, the life she had known, and the world she had been forced to leave. But she also considered the lessons she had learned at the ranch, the patience, the trust, the courage, and the understanding of another way of life. She realized that the world was not just one way or another, it could be both. She could honor her past while embracing the lessons of her present. After a long moment, she spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. She told Samuel that she wished to stay at the ranch for a while longer. She needed to continue learning, to grow, and to understand the world beyond fear. Samuel nodded, his eyes reflecting quiet pride and understanding. He did not question her choice, nor did he judge it. Instead, he offered her a place in the ranch's life, a space to learn, contribute, and continue discovering herself. The weeks turned into months, and Ahioka's life at the ranch became more intertwined with its daily rhythms. She learned to care for animals with skill and compassion, to work alongside others with understanding and patience, and to face challenges with courage. Samuel continued to guide her, his presence a steady and quiet support. Their bond deepened, not through words alone, but through shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect. She began to see that the world could be kinder than she had imagined, that strength could be gentle, and that trust could grow when nurtured with patience. One afternoon, as she rested under the shade of a large tree, Ahioka reflected on her journey. She thought of the fear she had felt when first captured, the uncertainty of the days that followed, and the courage she had discovered within herself. She realized that she had changed, not just in skill or knowledge, but in understanding. She had learned that people could be more than the fears and stories she had carried, that trust could be earned, and that kindness could exist even in unexpected places. Samuel approached, carrying a basket of fresh bread. He offered it to her with a simple smile, and she accepted. They shared the meal quietly, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the gentle sounds of the ranch. In that moment, Ahioka felt a sense of peace and belonging she had never known before. The ranch was no longer a place of fear, but a space of learning, growth, and understanding. She had found not just safety, but a sense of purpose and connection. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Ahioka stood at the edge of the fields, looking out over the land she had come to know. She thought of her family, of the plains she had loved, and of the lessons she had learned at the ranch. She realized that life was not about fear alone, nor about the choices others made for her. It was about understanding, courage, and the ability to grow through experience. She felt a quiet gratitude for the journey she had taken, for the trust she had built with Samuel, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. The final moments of the day were filled with a sense of calm and resolution. Ahioka understood that freedom was not just a matter of physical movement, but of choice and understanding. She could return to her people whenever she wished, carrying the lessons she had learned. But she also recognized that staying at the ranch offered her the opportunity to continue growing, to deepen her understanding of courage, trust, and kindness. The decision was hers, and in that choice lay her true freedom. As night fell, Ahioka returned to her room, her heart filled with quiet hope. She thought of the storm, the challenges she had faced, and the courage she had discovered. She reflected on Samuel's guidance, his patience, and the trust they had built together. The world, once full of fear and uncertainty, had become a place of learning, growth, and understanding. And as she drifted to sleep, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long, a peace born of courage, trust, and the knowledge that she could face the future with strength and wisdom. In the days that followed, Ahioka continued her life at the ranch, embracing each task, each lesson, and each moment of connection. She had discovered that people could surprise you, that trust could be earned, and that kindness could exist even where you least expected it. Her journey had taken her from fear to understanding, from uncertainty to courage, and from captivity to choice. And in the quiet, gentle world of the ranch, she had found a new beginning, a place where fear no longer ruled her heart, and where hope, trust, and understanding guided her path. And so, Ahioka's story came full circle. She had been taken from her home in fear, yet she had found safety, learning, and courage. She had discovered that people were not always as they seemed, that trust could be built through actions rather than words, and that freedom was as much about choice and understanding as it was about movement. The ranch, once a place of uncertainty, had become a space of growth and connection, and in that space, Ahioka had discovered not only the strength of others but the strength within herself.